1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Last Saturday, I went up to a planetarium with Robin. And the planetarium is at Santa Fe College. It's part of a partnership, I think, with the University of Florida. Anyway, it was so amazing. I hadn't been to a planetarium since I was a kid. It was in New York. I think it was called the Hayden Planetarium. I might be wrong about that. But anyway, so we went to this planetarium, saw this amazing program that took 51 minutes, had some beautiful music, and it was just and so much information about our own solar system in this particular show that I was like, gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I mean, every time I turned around, I was like, I didn't know that. Wow, there's so much I don't know about the things out there in outer space. And one of the people who was in the audience when the whole thing was done asked the professor who was putting on the presentation about the upcoming solar eclipse. And again, I said, I didn't know that. There's a solar eclipse getting ready to happen. I had no idea. Dr. Steve Ruskin probably knew about that. He's an award-winning historian of astronomy. He's on the board of advisors for the National Space Science and Technology Institute. He's a visiting researcher at Cambridge University in England. He's an alumnus of the Launchpad Astronomy Workshop. He's written a book. Do we have the book?
No.
No? It's called America's First Great Eclipse, How Scientists, Tourists, and the Rocky Mountain Eclipse of 1878 Changed Astronomy Forever. And I'll have him tell you about the eclipse that's coming up in August. Dr. Ruskin, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Very good. I wish you were sitting next to me when we went to that planetarium. Because every time I said I didn't know that, you would have said, "Oh, I knew that."
Well, I don't know. There's a lot to learn. So I think the universe is a big place, and then even the solar system is a big place. So there's definitely a lot to learn. And you're right. It is the Hayden Planetarium in New York. Were you at the American Museum of Natural History?
Yes.
Yeah,
are they together? I can't remember. Are they together?
Well, they're associated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was huge, if I remember right. But the one we went to in Gainesville, Florida, was not big, but it was wonderful. Just for the local listeners, you got to go there. Where are you, Steve?
I'm actually in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So not, middle of the country. I guess.
Do you know what
amazed? Not too far.
Do you know what amazed both Robin and I is that the years that some of these celestial bodies were discovered. Like, I have a hard enough time just seeing a planet, and they were seeing the moons around the planets. That amazes me. How could they do that with just a telescope? It's amazing.
Well, I think that's exactly it. But these weren't just telescopes, the sorts of things that you think that you go to Walmart and buy and put in your backyard. These were quite large telescopes, so they could really see pretty deep into space, especially some of the planets when they were reflecting the light of the sun. That they can be picked up by the larger telescopes.
It's just amazing.
These are the big ones that you see in those giant domes.
So I saw a movie a long time ago. I believe it was a black and white movie, and these Americans were in some uncivilized country. You remember how movies used to be made, and they wanted to fool the indigenous people that they had power over the gods, and they knew an eclipse was coming.
Yep.
So do you remember this movie? So they pretended that they made the sun go dark, and then all of the indigenous peoples were worshiping them.
Yeah, no, and I think they took that from Columbus, because Christopher Columbus apparently did the same thing in Jamaica. He had an almanac from Europe that was, told him when a lunar eclipse was going to come, and he predicted it, and apparently that really made some impression.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There's another thing I didn't know, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me about the one that you were writing about in the book. This was 1878.
Sure. Well, yeah, and what I did with this book, America's First Great Eclipse, I'm an historian of astronomy, like you said in the intro, and I appreciate that. I knew that there was an eclipse coming up this year, and it's this August, and I've known about that for a long time. I mean, many people have, astronomers especially.
I found out on Saturday.
Well, you still have 2 months. It's 2 months from today, so you got some time.
Oh, okay,
and we can talk about it. But And I, as an historian of astronomy, I've looked at a number of different things. But being in Colorado, back in 1878, we had what I call America's first great eclipse, and I'm calling it. These great eclipses are the ones that sort of cross the entire country and allow many Americans, if not all of us, to see it in whole or in part. And so to coincide with this upcoming eclipse on August, I decided to write this book because what happened in 1878 has some really interesting parallels to what's going to happen in just a couple months. And maybe the best way to start is to talk about the one that's coming up. It's going to be, they're calling it the Great American Eclipse because it's going to cross from Oregon to South Carolina, right? So the entire country can see it, and if you're in what's called the shadow path, this narrow band of about 70 miles where the moon is totally blocking the sun, you can see a total solar eclipse, and the day will sort of turn to night, or at least a deep twilight. You'll see the stars.
Really? So could
you'll see the planets. It'll be incredible.
So I'll have to drive to South Carolina to see it? I'm in Florida, so...
Yes, that's the thing. I'll put up a map on my Facebook page when we're done for the Florida folks listening, but the closest spot for you is going to be South Carolina, and it's kind of the path of the eclipse will be right sort of between Charleston and Myrtle Beach. That's kind of where the spread's going to be. So that's where you would want to go if you can. I know it's far. I think it's about maybe 300 or 400 miles, but
Robin can drive.
Yeah, it's a day trip.
It's a once in a lifetime thing. So hey, why not? Well, maybe not once.
So
but they're very rare.
What will it look like here in Florida? Will we have partial?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right, and that's the exact term. From Ocala and your area, sort of central Florida, you're going to see about an 80% eclipse. So the sun will be 80% covered. So it won't be quite the same as the day, the day turning to night, but it will still be pretty spectacular. If you can't make it up to South Carolina.
What day of the week is that?
That is August 21st, and that's a Monday.
Damn, Monday.
So, they expect that it will be possibly the highest traffic day in the history of the country.
I bet you, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. And how long does it last once it happens?
Well, if the moon being blocked, the sun being blocked by the moon only lasts about 2.5. In South Carolina, about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So it goes pretty fast. The whole, for the moon to go across the whole surface of the sun from start to finish takes about 3 hours, but that middle part, right when it totally blocks the sun, only lasts a couple minutes.
Well, we're used to that here because we wait in lines in Disney for 6 hours.
That's right.
For a ride that takes 2 minutes. Yes.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it's basically it's a sort of a national Disney ride event. That's what it is.
I like that.
You're right. And so back in 1878, they were doing something similar, although they didn't have the state highway system. But tourists were traveling from the East Coast because in 1878 the eclipse took place over the Rocky Mountains, and so they didn't have the highway system. They just had the new transcontinental railway, and so tourists sort of got all piled on the trains and went out west to see it as well. And you had these little frontier towns like Colorado Springs and Denver, and they were just completely overwhelmed.
Oh, wow.
With tourists.
So what kind of advice do you give people that would like to photograph this to get the best pictures possible?
Well, I'm not a photographer, but there's a lot of resources, especially NASA and some other sites have them. With a normal, say, an iPhone or even sort of a pocket camera, you're not going to get the best view because you're still dealing with the sun. So they recommend that professionals recommend that you would probably need some sort of professional equipment with the proper solar filters and that sort of thing. Nevertheless, people will be taking phone or images with their phones, and I would just say try to have a steady hand. Be as best do it as best you can, and there's going to be some sort of Eclipse mega movie that they're going to put together where everyone can upload all their photos from across the country, and they'll sort of try to do a time-lapse thing. Yep.
So I have a question about it from an astronomer's point of view.
Sure.
Two of them, the one that you're writing about in the book and the one that's happening in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Did astronomers then, and will you in 2 months, learn something new from an eclipse? Is there still information to be learned that can only be learned when there's an eclipse?
That's a really good question. Back in 1878, they were still and really just starting to figure out what the sun was. They never thought that they would ever be able to sort of understand anything beyond Earth without actually going there. And of course, space travel in 1878 was still a sort of realm of science fiction.
Sure.
But they were able to use newly created instruments like spectroscopes to sort of analyze the sun's light. And so in a way, they could kind of do a chemistry experiment from 93 million miles away, but they were still taking baby steps. So there was a lot to learn in 1878 about what the corona was made of. The sun's corona is sort of that gaseous atmosphere that you can only see during an eclipse. It looks like a sort of a shimmering crown. It's really spectacular. But So back then, yes, there was a lot that could still be learned. But now, we know so much. We've sent, we have satellites up above the Earth's atmosphere. There's not a lot that scientists are trying to find out now during an eclipse. There's a few things here and there about how it might affect our atmosphere, but we pretty much know all about the sun.
Okay, well, could and do the scientists create like artificial eclipses, like just by putting a satellite in front of another satellite or something and looking at the
yeah, that's actually right. And even back then in 1878, they were bringing out small instruments that would try to sort of block the sun, in the absence of the moon doing it for them. But yeah, now, and they don't even need to block the light of the sun so much because they can use other instruments to analyze it. But yeah, they have been trying to do similar things. So.
Does an eclipse affect like the tides and things like that on the planet? Or
no. It doesn't really affect the tides. If anything, it affects the temperature. It might freak out the wildlife when the sun goes dark. Yeah, there's a great story which I mentioned in my book. It's apocryphal, unfortunately, but Thomas Edison actually went out to the eclipse in Wyoming in 1878 and brought one of his his new inventions with him called the thermometer to measure the sun's corona. But when it went dark, he got to Wyoming late. And as I relate in my book, all the hotel rooms were taken.
Oh no!
Everyone to be. He got one left, but he didn't have a good observing site, so he had to use a chicken coop. And the story went that when the sun, when the eclipse happened and the sun went dark, all the chickens started coming home to roost because they thought it was nighttime. Now that's not it turns out that was sort of made up by some of the reporters. But similar things did happen. I mean, it did. Birds go back to their nests. Chickens do come home to roost in situations like that. But I don't think Edison was covered in feathers or anything, but he was still observing from a chicken coop.
This is a fun topic. Dr. Steve Ruskin is our guest. He's an award-winning historian of astronomy, probably the first historian of astronomy I've ever spoken to. His book is called America's First Great Eclipse: How Scientists, Tourists, and the Rocky Mountain Eclipse of 1878 Changed Astronomy Forever. We're talking about the upcoming eclipse, which will be in 2 months from today, which you'll see 80% of it if you stay here in Ocala. The closer you get to South Carolina, I guess the more that percentage increases. But tell me about the book itself. It says the Rocky Mountain Eclipse, how it changed astronomy forever. How did it change astronomy?
Well, that's a great question. And what happened, and most people don't realize this, but the eclipse itself in 1878, they learned a little bit, but eclipses happened so fast, you would need a whole bunch of eclipses to figure out, what the sun's made of and the sorts of things that I talked about when you asked if they knew anything new about the sun then. But what was unique about the 1878 eclipse was it was over the Rocky Mountains, and that was the first time in history that so many astronomers got together and observed from high altitudes. Now we take that sort of thing for granted. I mean, every observatory you can sort of picture in your mind, all the big ones, they're usually on a mountaintop somewhere. Whether it's Mauna Kea in Hawaii or the Lick Observatory or some of the ones in South America. They're all on mountaintops, but back then there was still a question about whether or not observing from mountaintops was even useful, which seems laughable now. But the 1878 eclipse, with hundreds of astronomers out there all observing from the higher, Rocky Mountains and even the high plains, they realized for the first time that yes, in fact, observing from high altitudes can be very beneficial. And in some cases, it was really tough because one guy, Samuel Langley, who's Langley Air Force Base is named after, he went to the top of Pikes Peak, 14,000 feet, and that was the highest observing station ever at that point that an astronomer had been to. And he was just mortified because even though it was July in the middle of 1878, he was experiencing snow, blizzards. Wow. He woke up with in his tent. There was a 10-inch drift of snow on his pillow.
Oh my
He was like 14,000 feet might be a bit high, at least back then. So.
Oh wow.
What are some of the signs that will alert you to an eclipse coming? I mean, do you know that just because you know that,
what will you see in this upcoming eclipse?
No,
or do you mean sort of how do astronomers predict when they're going to happen?
Exactly. The latter.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, the astronomers, the moon and sun and Earth, they all move in a very precise orbit that we can calculate. I mean, not me. I'm not that good at math, but I'm okay. But that's why we have computers, right? But so eclipses can be predicted centuries, really thousands of years. I mean, probably out, indefinitely. Eclipses can be known because we know the precise movements of the moon, sun, and Earth. And a solar eclipse, of course, is when the sun is blocked. So we know with pretty much pinpoint accuracy now when all the next solar eclipses will be. So that there will be another solar eclipse, fortunately, in America in only 7 years, in 2024.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's not going to be quite as dramatic. It won't go across coast to coast. It's going to come up from Mexico, kind of go through the Midwest, and then go, I believe, up over the Great Lakes and into Canada. So certainly, I think Americans will be able to see it. But we know exactly when that will be in 2024.
I have, let's see, I went to Amazon to see the book, Amazon's First Great Eclipse by Steve Ruskin. It's got 5-star reviews. Oh, my
nice.
gosh. It's got an awesome cover, by the way.
Thank you so much.
So I'm anxious to read it because, I'm kind of, I guess I got the bug bit last Saturday when we went to the planetarium. Do you know what they said? They were saying this at the planetarium. I wanted to ask you about this.
Sure.
That the sun and the moon are the only two celestial bodies that don't actually have a name, because all stars are suns and all satellites around planets are moons. So we never really gave them a name. So I was thinking, well, wait a minute. There's this ad we have on the radio. Name a star.
Right.
I'll pick that one. I'll bet if they need a name, I'll give that to. I'll name it after my father. Or
then
something.
we'd all be orbiting in Larry's universe, right?
That's right.
Have you ever heard that before? Is that true? I mean, I don't want to doubt the professor.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, well, sun. I think the name that the ancients gave the sun, at least in the Western tradition, was Sol, and so maybe that's a name, because that's why we get solar and things like that. And I, but I don't. That's a good point. I mean, we just call it the sun and the moon,
right?
Which are sort of more, they're not descriptive like Larry and Rob and Steve and whatever. But, yeah, well, maybe you should go to the Star Registry or whatever it is, and maybe it's available.
That's too funny.
We have been hearing reports that Nebraska is the best place to be.
Oh, yeah.
To see the total eclipse. Is that true?
Well, the predictions in terms of the best places, I mean, I think the best place is whatever's closest to you, because it's probably better to try to see it than not. But the reason why they're saying some of those plains, the high western plains like Nebraska and eastern Wyoming, which is where I'm going to be, are the best places, because that's the best chance for clear weather. Right, because if there's clouds, if the clouds, the sky will still go dark. But if you have clouds blocking the sun, you won't see what's, the solar corona, that cool glowing crown that appears when the sun's completely blocked. So yeah, Nebraska has the least amount of cloudy weather in around August 21st in terms of the historical meteorological data.
I got you. Okay.
So that's why. I mean, I think anywhere is good. What's amazing today, with so many people going, like Yellowstone's going to get apparently 40,000 people. They expect that to be the biggest one-day.
Is that where you'll be?
No, I'm going to be in eastern Wyoming, a little bit north of Cheyenne.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure yet where I will go.
What
He's
time
not telling.
What time of day will it be? What time of day?
It's going to vary. So the eclipse moves fast. It moves at about 2,000 miles an hour. So it's only going to take about an hour and a half to cross the country. So it'll first hit Oregon around, I think, about 10:15 in the morning Pacific Daylight Time,
okay.
And then let's say, I'm looking at a map here, around Kansas City. It'll just glance over Kansas City around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but that's Central Time.
Okay.
And then it's going to exit over Charleston and South Carolina, the South Carolina coast, around 2:45 Eastern Time.
So I'm guessing in Wyoming, where you'll be, it's a little too early for a glass of wine. I'm just trying to picture what you bear. What is
it might be.
Do you have a way? I mean, is it a celebrating moment? Do you celebrate?
Absolutely. In fact, I've seen Eclipse wine being made. I've seen ads for Eclipse moonshine, which is perfect. Back 78, I found this great story where in 1878, out in a little place called La Junta, Colorado, which is really a small little town, and some astronomers came there because that's they had to go where the eclipse path was going to go, and one guy wrote to his friend. He said, "Hey, all the astronomers are here from Washington. Come on down. I've got 10 barrels of beer." They were making a party out of it even 150 years ago.
I love this story. Oh my goodness.
What fascinates you the most about the eclipse itself and about astronomy in general.
Oh, I have an astronomy question too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think what's most fascinating, not only is an eclipse so rare and just probably one of nature's grandest spectacles, to see the sun just disappear is completely awe-inspiring. And I think what's also neat now is how, especially in this sort of contentious time, Americans are really getting excited about this. And I think if a bunch of us are kind of stopping for a few minutes just to stare up together, that might be kind of neat. Maybe we'll.
Isn't it dangerous to stare at it? I always heard you shouldn't stare at it.
Well, that's true. You can look up at the eclipse when the sun's blocked for those few minutes. That's the only time experts say it's safe. But otherwise, you'll want to get a pair of eclipse glasses, and they're really cheap. I'd get them now though because there's going to be a rush on them. I'm sure they're $1 or $2 on Amazon or maybe Walmart or Target carries them. I don't know. All
right, I'm going to pick your brain. I know it's not fair because you're not here to talk about what I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
But at the planetarium, they showed us all the planets. I'm sorry, all the moons of all the planets, and they gave the names of all the moons, and they all seem to be named after mythological gods and things like that. And then in parentheses it said natural satellite after every single one of them, except one of the moons around Neptune. It didn't say that. It said captured dwarf planet. All right.
Yeah.
How do they know that? I mean, how do they know that it's a natural or it was a captured dwarf? How do they know that?
That is a good question, and I don't know the answer.
Have you ever heard that before? That one of the moons?
I have. Yeah, I have. I mean, I know what they're talking about. I mean, the gravity of what they're saying is probably that the source of that material for that moon came from elsewhere, at least elsewhere in the solar system. Not from the particles that sort of formed.
Oh, okay.
Billions of years ago for the planet. That's my guess, but I mean, I don't know. So I know that's what they mean. At least I believe that's what they mean.
Okay.
But how they know that, I would imagine it'd be some sort of analysis of what it's made of compared to the others.
It's similar to DNA. If I have me and I'm surrounded by 5 children, and 4 of them are mine.
Yeah.
Somebody who knows DNA analysis can figure out which one I captured.
Yeah. I suppose that's an interesting analogy. Hopefully, you know which 4 of yours.
All right, this is fun. All right, the book is getting really good reviews. Okay, I found it on Amazon.
Thanks.
Do you want to direct us to a website that you have?
Yeah, my website is firstgreateclipse.com. So it's just the last 3 words of the title of America's First Great Eclipse.
Okay.
So firstgreateclipse.com.
A scarf looks good on you. I should get a scarf.
An ascot.
Is that what that's called, an ascot? It's a nice looking thing. Okay.
Thank you.
You got to get one now.
Especially
to watch the eclipse with.
I've also got a Facebook page. It's just at First Great Eclipse, and I'll put some stuff up after we get off the phone for the Florida folks. Just more about going up to South Carolina and everything.
Okay, tell me.
If they want to continue the conversation there, that's fine.
Tell me
wonderful.
What is the Facebook page again?
Sure, it's at First Great Eclipse. First Great Eclipse. If they just type that in, it should pop up.
Great Eclipse. Okay, I'm going to be a friend or whatever I need to do. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
First Great Eclipse. Oh, there. Oh, there is your cover of your book. Okay. Shop now, like. Okay.
That's pretty
Shop
cool.
now, like. I liked it. Following you, and there I go. Okay, so now you'll let me know what we're going to need to know. Oh, okay.
I'll put up a few things. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's awful sweet of you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being on the air with us. What a fun conversation, huh?
Yeah, it was great. You guys are fantastic.
The Great American Solar Eclipse happening on August 21st, I'm sorry. And the book, America's First Great Eclipse, is on Amazon and all the other websites that Dr. Steve told us about. Thank you, Dr. Steve Ruskin. That was very great. Thank you.
Hey, thank you both.
All right, we'll be right back.
Take care.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Wednesday, intervals of clouds and sunshine with a shower and thunderstorm or 2, high 88 to 92. The partly cloudy Wednesday night, low 74 to 78. For Thursday, times of sun and clouds with a shower or thunderstorm, high 89 to 93. And for Friday, partly sunny, just a chance of a thunderstorm, high 89 to 93. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
You've got a garden and we've got a show for you called You've Got a Garden with your host, Master Gardener Carol.